Just as every main character deserves a worthy introduction, so too does every secondary character. Hey guys, how are you doing today? It's PE Gilbert, your blogger, writing consultant, and the author to the fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter. And today we are going to discuss the best ways to introduce your secondary characters. But before we go any further with today's video, hit that subscribe button. In our previous video on how to write the perfect beginning, we discussed introducing your main character. Usually, but not without exception, the main character is introduced in the first scene of the narrative, and to do this in a way that grabs your audience's attention, we discussed 4 factors, and these were: 1. Give the audience a flavour for the character, i.e. his status, personality and goals. 2. Hint at his struggles for the rest of the narrative without divulging too much detail. 3. Add parts in the dialogue that are key to the character which will be extrapolated over the course of the narrative. And 4. Show the context of the world in which he lives in. Like with the main character, it may not be possible to implement all 4 of these points when you introduce your secondary character, but you should still aim to apply as many of them as possible to give your audience a great taste for what is to come vis-à-vis your secondary character. Indeed, the timing and the way that your secondary character is introduced often determines his role and his importance to the plot, which varies from story to story. In this video, we shall look at a variety of different roles that secondary characters have played, as well as the timing of their introductions and how they have been introduced to their respective stories. And I hope my tips make the writing process a little easier for you as well. 1. How to introduce the useful assistant. Surprise, surprise, the useful assistant is there to provide some much needed useful assistance to the main character. Whenever the protagonist has a problem, he turns to the useful assistant to help him find a solution to the problem in the nick of time. An excellent example of the useful assistant is Hermione Granger from the Harry Potter series. We first meet Hermione when Harry and Ron are on the Hogwarts Express, on their way to Hogwarts for the first time in The Philosopher's Stone, the first volume in the series. Hermione watches Ron do a spelling correctly prior to showing off some of her own magical knowledge. Then she tells Harry and Ron to put their robes on as it's part of the school uniform, and then she walks off. Thus, right from the off, we get the sense that 1. Hermione is intelligent, knowledgeable, and very confident in her abilities. 2. That she is likely to become the know-it-all of the class and Harry's go-to person when he needs to solve a seemingly insolvable problem. 3. That she will tell off Harry and Ron again at some point in the story. And 4. That she lives in a world similar to our own, just with wizards. Plus, we are introduced to Hermione around 1/5 of the way through the first novel in the series, highlighting her significance to the plot. 1a. How to introduce the ambiguous, unreliable ally. A variation of the useful assistant is the ambiguous, unreliable ally. Should you wish to make your useful assistant seemingly undependable, you'll need to introduce him in a way that shows that he cannot be trusted, even though in the end he will provide support when it matters most. Our first example of an ambiguous, unreliable ally is Selina Kyle / Catwoman, played by Anne Hathaway in The Dark Knight Rises. We first meet Selina in one of the first scenes of the film as a waitress in Wayne Manor, Bruce Wayne's / Batman's home. But her being a waitress is a ruse, so that she can steal Bruce's fingerprints and his mother's pearls. Oh yeah, Selina Kyle is a thief, and tea leaves are not exactly known for being trustworthy, are they? An injured Bruce notices her. She acts all apologetic and innocent at first, but then Bruce points out that she is wearing his mother's pearls, which she stole from his allegedly uncrackable safe. In an instant, Selina adopts her confident and witty persona, prior to kicking away the cane that Bruce uses to walk with and backflipping out of the window to escape in acrobatic fashion. From our introduction of Selina Kyle / Catwoman, we gain the sense that 1. She is a chameleon, a thief, and intelligent in a manipulative sort of way. 2. That her and Bruce are likely to meet again, and that neither he nor the audience will ever know whose side she's on. 3. That there is likely to be more witty banter and sizzling chemistry between these two characters. And 4. That Selina lives in Gotham, a corrupt city where everyone is out for themselves. Our second example of an ambiguous, unreliable ally is Lord Thomas Stanley from Philippa Gregory's The Red Queen, one of her historical fiction novels on the Wars of the Roses. Lord Thomas Stanley is the third husband of our protagonist, Margaret Beaufort. He is a powerful nobleman in 15th century England and has a position at court. We first meet Lord Thomas when Margaret proposes a marital alliance with him. Lord Thomas seems pleased with the proposal, as Margaret is a wealthy woman and has a son who has a claim to the throne, since Henry Tudor is the last Lancastrian by this point in the story. From the moment we meet Lord Thomas Stanley, we get the feeling that 1. He is Machiavellian by nature, looks for ways to better his position, has a wolfish grin, and cannot be trusted. 2. That as a powerful lord, he is going to play a significant role in a war and will back the side he believes he will benefit most from. 3. That his and Margaret's marriage is political and loveless, and that their dialogue will be strictly political. And 4. That he lives in late 15th century England, at a time of feudalism and constant internecine fighting between the houses of Lancaster and York. However, what is odd about the timing of Lord Thomas Stanley's introduction is how late it comes. Unlike with Selina Kyle, who was introduced to us in one of the first scenes of The Dark Knight Rises, Lord Thomas is introduced to us between half and 2/3 of the way through The Red Queen. The lateness of his introduction is most surprising, as it leaves little time for him to be fully fleshed out. Yet, Philippa Gregory manages to give him a three-dimensional personality very successfully. 2. How to introduce the supportive friend. The supportive friend is not quite the useful assistant. The supportive friend is there to be loyal to the protagonist and to provide him support. Plus, he must come up with an idea that will have significance for the plot at some point in the narrative. An example of a loyal friend is Peregrine Pippin Took, played by Billy Boyd, in The Lord of the Rings, as he is loyal to both Merry
It's me. It's Pippin.
and Frodo. We first meet Pippin at Bilbo's 111th birthday party, where he sneaks into a tent and sets off the biggest firework inside the tent. Subsequently, Pippin is made to do the washing up as punishment, which in fairness to him, he does without complaint with his friend Merry. Thus, from the way Pippin is introduced, we can appreciate the following about his character. 1. That he is a hobbit who is mischievous and not the brightest firework in the sky, but that he enjoys having a good time, making those around him smile, and is ultimately a good guy at heart. 2. His willingness to throw himself into mischief is probably how he will end up joining Frodo and Sam on their quest, plus get them into danger here and there. 3. That in future dialogue, Pippin is likely to make those around him smile and laugh. And 4. That he lives in a fantasy world. Moreover, Pippin is introduced to us in one of the first scenes in the story, highlighting his importance to the plot. From his introduction though, could we have foreseen that Pippin would become something of a hero and that he would take his loyalty to the nth degree? Probably not. But we do see a great deal of his positive nature in his introduction, so his loyalty and heroism is merely a natural progression of his character. 2a. How to introduce the fat funny friend. The fat funny friend is the poor cousin of the supportive friend. The fat funny friend is in the story for comic relief, and more often than not, his jokes will revolve around his appetite and his bulk. Alas, there is often not much more to the fat funny friend, as he doesn't add much to the plot, and he is unlikely to have a three-dimensional character. For example, let's look at the dwarf Bomba in the Hobbit film trilogy. Bomba is one of the 13 dwarves and utterly anonymous. In fact, it was only on watching a review of the Hobbit trilogy that I noticed him or even learned his name. To back up his anonymity, let's read what Warner Brothers, the studio that made the movie trilogy, wrote about Bomber. Brother to Bofa and cousin to Beefa, Bomber is the chief cook amongst the company of dwarves. His immense size and voracious appetite causes frequent problems and laughter for himself and the travelling party. Despite his size, he can be surprisingly effective as a fighter, and woe betide anyone who makes him late for dinner. Well, Warner Brothers said a lot more than I noticed of Bomber when watching the trilogy. We meet Bomber in one of the first scenes of the trilogy, when he and the other dwarves invite themselves into Bilbo's house and eat all of his food. Bomber is the one holding several wheels of cheese here. As for Bomber's goals, I don't think he has any, bar to follow Thorin Oakenshield and eat, of course. If he has any personal motivations, he doesn't mention them, and he just blends in with the other dwarves, with the exceptions of Thorin, Balin, the big bald one, and the one who takes a liking to Toriel. 3. How to introduce the love interest. Traditionally, the love interest was played by a good-looking woman who would be in the narrative solely to stroke the macho male main character's ego. Her intelligence was irrelevant, and she was just there so that the main character could save her. While the role of the simple love interest seems completely anachronistic today, it is worth highlighting the example of Dr. Christmas Jones, played by Denise Richards, in the James Bond film The World Is Not Enough, to illustrate my point. In the movie, she is a nuclear physicist who knows how to defuse a nuclear bomb.
You serious?
Yeah, I think we all raised a brow at this one, because for all Dr. Christmas Jones's intelligence, although how anyone could claim intelligence with a name like that is a bit beyond me, she gives away her role in the film right from the off.
Are you here for a reason? Or are you just hoping for a glimmer?
Thus, as soon as we meet Dr. Christmas Jones, and the name gets more risible every time I mention it, we grasp the following. 1. That she is the classic damsel in distress, and there for eye candy. 2. That she will likely get caught or put herself into life-threatening situations so that James Bond will have to save her. 3. That her dialogue is pretty irrelevant as she is the damsel in distress. And 4. That she lives in the latter 90s and is the damsel in distress. There's not much more to Dr. Jones's role. Today, this kind of role would be deemed insulting to most women. But the film The World Is Not Enough was released in 1999. The world was a different place back in that millennia. Also, it is worth bearing in mind that we are introduced to Dr. Christmas Jones midway through the film and skimpily dressed in the middle of a nuclear facility with radiation everywhere. Do I really need to say anything about the hazards of walking around a nuclear facility dressed like Lara Croft? Honestly, it is as if the filmmakers knew that Dr. Christmas Jones's role was a poor and unimportant one, so they introduced her as late as plausibly possible for a major character, and then wasted no time at all in showing us her true purpose.
Or are you just hoping for a glimmer?
4. How to introduce the mentor. The mentor is usually an older figure who guides the central protagonist toward his goal, and it usually takes the form of a father, a mother, a friend, or a teacher. For our first example, let's look at Brom from Christopher Paolini's The Inheritance Cycle, and played by Jeremy Irons in the film adaptation of Eragon, the first book in the series. We meet Brom when he tells the story over a campfire in the village of Carverhall about the fall of the Dragon Riders. Our eponymous main character, Eragon, is listening to Brom's story. He is a new dragon rider and is in need of knowledge and training. So who better to be Eragon's mentor than Brom? Thus, from the moment we meet Brom, we gain the sense that 1. He has a pensive appearance and is going to be the mentor figure for Eragon, since it is a fantasy trope that the old man/wizard is a mentor to the main character. 2. That he will have to teach Eragon a lot in a short time. 3. That there is more to Brom than what meets the eye. And 4. That he lives in a medieval-like fantasy world with a villainous, all-powerful king in complete control. Our second example surrounds a very different type of mentor, one who is far more demanding, to put it mildly, and that is conductor Terence Fletcher, played by J.K. Simmons, in Whiplash. we meet Fletcher in the opening scene, watching Andrew Neiman, played by Miles Teller, play the drums. Andrew notices Fletcher and stops playing. Fletcher then emerges from the darkness to dominate the screen. He has an imposing presence due to his size, and the all-black suit and shirt add to his authoritative aura. Fletcher then questions Andrew, probingly, as to why he stopped playing, because Fletcher is looking for players. Subsequently, Andrew continues playing, but in the middle, Fletcher just walks out. He gives no hint either as to whether he is impressed by Andrew's skills, or not. From Fletcher's introduction, we get the sense that 1. Fletcher is intimidating, difficult to please, and not a particularly nice person. 2. That he is looking for talented people for one reason or another. 3. That he and Andrew are going to have many more conversations in a teacher-pupil relationship in which he is going to push Andrew hard. And 4. That Fletcher is the head of the music school and his decisions count. Moreover, Fletcher is introduced to us in the very first scene of the movie, highlighting that he has a very important role to play as Andrew's mentor. 5. How to introduce the bad influence. The bad influence is something of an inverted mentor. If the mentor is meant to guide the protagonist toward his goal, the bad influence leads him astray. For example, let's look at Lord Henry Wotton from The Picture of Dorian Gray and played by Colin Firth in the film adaptation Dorian Gray in 2009. We are introduced to Lord Henry Wotton in the opening scene of the book. As Basil the painter paints the portrait of the titular Dorian, Lord Henry waffles on about the virtues of a hedonistic lifestyle, which he clearly doesn't abide by as he is a married man and a faithful husband. Lord Henry's sardonic assertion that beauty is the only aspect of life worth pursuing makes Dorian realise that he will grow old, but that the portrait of him will not. Subsequently, Lord Henry encourages Dorian to enter into a Faustian pact, so that the portrait of him will age, but that he will not. As a result, Dorian pursues a life of decadence and debauchery, ever at Lord Henry's insistence. Thus, from the off, we realise that Lord Henry is witty and intelligent, but that he will be a bad influence on the young, impressionable Dorian. 2. That he is a hypocrite, as he does not practice what he preaches. 3. That he will find new ways to regurgitate his hypocrisies throughout the narrative to ensure that he lives vicariously through Dorian. And 4. That Lord Henry lives at the tail end of Victorian England, when hypocritical morality was the way of life. In addition, that we are introduced to Lord Henry in the opening scene highlights his narrative significance. 6. How to introduce the traitor. When you decide to make a secondary character a traitor, you must introduce him early to the story and make him friends, or at least allies, with the main character. In the 1998 film Snake Eyes, Detective Rick Santoro, played by Nicolas Cage, and US Navy Commander Kevin Dunn are the best of friends, and they work together to ensure that the US Secretary of Defense is escorted to and fro a boxing match safely. But during the match, a shooting happens, and some people of dubious importance to the plot get killed. Rick suspects a conspiracy at foot, and learns about 3/4 of the way through the film that his old friend Kevin is behind the conspiracy. Nevertheless, upon meeting Kevin, we gauge the following. 1. That Kevin is seemingly a nice guy, even though in reality he is duplicitous. 2. That he is friends with Rick and seemingly wants the same objective, even though he really has a different objective at heart. 3. His dialogue with Rick is good, and that the two alleged friends will work together until Rick finds out that he has been betrayed. And 4. That Kevin lives in the modern world, or at least in the 1990s, and works in the security sector. In addition, Kevin is introduced to us early on in the film, highlighting his importance to the narrative. 7. When you don't show hints of your secondary character's true personality, goals, and/or struggles during his introduction. While I recommend that you show hints of your secondary character's true personality, agenda, and/or struggles when you introduce him to the story, you don't have to. It is not a necessity. Indeed, you can introduce your secondary character with a completely different nature to the person he becomes by the end of the narrative, which makes for a great story arc. A character who comes across in a very different way to the person he becomes is Samwise Gamgee, played by Sean Astin, in The Lord of the Rings. We first meet Sam at Bilbo's 111th birthday party. Sam appears shy as he wants to dance with his romantic interest, Rosie, but doesn't have the confidence to go up to her and ask her. So Frodo pushes him, and then Sam dances with her. Sam's shy nature here is in contrast to the person he becomes after Gandalf tells him to be a loyal and supportive friend and go with Frodo to destroy the ring in Mount Doom. After Gandalf tells him this, Sam becomes bold and brave, which gives him a fantastic, wonderful story arc. Again, while I would hesitate to advise you not to show any hint of your secondary character's goals, personality, and/or struggles for the upcoming narrative, you can do it, and it has been done successfully as well, as the case with Samwise Gamgee shows. You just have to think carefully about how you want your secondary character to develop. Conclusion: a general tip that we can learn from this video. From this video, I hope that you can deduce that the best way to introduce your secondary character varies depending upon what role you want him to play in the story. Nevertheless, if you wish for your secondary character to have a significant impact on the plot, it is best to introduce him as early as possible, i.e. within the first fifth to third of the narrative. That is not to say that there are no exceptions to this tip, but if you look at the majority of examples that we've discussed, they tended to have been introduced relatively early on in their respective narratives, as was the case for Hermione, Selina Kyle, Brom, Lord Henry Wotton, Kevin Dunn, and Samwise Gamgee. And that's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I really hope you have enjoyed this video, found it interesting, and that it helps to make the writing process a little easier for you as well. Like, comment, and hit that subscribe button, and tell me, what do you think of my tips? What do you think I've missed out? And when do you think is the best time to introduce your secondary characters? Moreover, my debut fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter, is out. If you are looking for a book that is short, fast-paced, and full of suspense, then check it out. And then you will be able to see whether or not I keep to my own writing tips as well. I have left a link for the book in the description below. Otherwise, join me next time when we'll continue on the introducing front by looking at how to introduce your villain. Until then, keep well. Once again, guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it and I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button and then you will be the first to receive more awesome content from my channel, and I hope to see you again soon.